Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 5-part tutorial series from Avid Blogs, Get Started Fast with Avid Media Composer 7. Now in this lesson we're going to be talking all about effects, but before we get started I want to remind you that the team at Avid is constantly updating Media Composer to make it the absolute best editing system that you can get on the market today. So what's important to keep in mind is that because they're always updating it, you're going to want to make sure that you have the most recent version of Media Composer. Now as of this recording, the most recent version of Avid's Media Composer is version 7.0.3. Now if you want to log in and see what version is the most current version, you can simply head on over to your web browser, you can navigate to avid.com/downloads, log into the download center, and once you're in the download center, all you're going to do is simply head on down to the Avid Media Composer section located right here, and once you're in there, you're going to see the most recent version of Media Composer is version 7.0.3. Now that's the most recent version of version 7. If you still happen to be on version 6.5, the most recent version is 6.5.4, and so on and so forth. So like I said, log into the website from time to time, check to make sure that you're running the most recent version, so that way if you are experiencing any issues, these updates will get you back up and running in no time flat. Okay, so like I said earlier, we're talking about effects in this lesson, so let's Command Tab for all you Mac users or Alt Tab for all you Windows users into Media Composer, and let's get started. And the first thing that we obviously need is some footage to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to navigate over to my project window, and because we'll be creating a new sequence, I'm just going to open my sequences bin, and we're going to use some footage from Digital Juice's Video Tracks HD. I'm just going to grab a few different shots here. It doesn't really matter which one. Now of course, as soon as I go to edit this clip into a new timeline, because I have multiple bins open, I'm going to be prompted and asked which bin do I want to put this sequence into, and of course we're going to put it into sequences. Now I could use either insert or overwrite. I just happen to be using overwrite by force of habit, which is of course the shortcut B on my keyboard on both Mac and Windows. And let's just grab a couple other shots here. Again, like I said, doesn't really matter which ones we use. I'm just going to put 2 more shots in here, and we'll choose a last one here. This is a good one. Very nice. Okay, so let's talk about doing a basic transition. And when I say a basic transition, I'm referring to, of course, a dissolve. Now, in most cases, this sort of throws people a little bit for a loop because they have a little bit of difficulty finding it. Now, if you're looking for an effect, there's only one place you can go to find all of the effects inside of Avid's Media Composer, and that's the effects palette. Now, there's a couple ways that you can get to it. You can actually navigate to it right up here at the top of the project window right there. But that's not how I like to access it. I like to access it by simply hitting Command and 8 on the Mac, Control and 8 on Windows, and you'll see we now have a floating window with the effects palette. Now you'll see that if we come all the way down to the bottom of the effects palette, you'll see that we can start to find some of our transition effects, such as wipes, like horizontal sawtooth wipes, like such. You'll see, there we go. We've got a couple others in here. We've got a shape wipe. I'll just grab the circle shape wipe. We'll just stick it onto this transition right here. You'll see, there we go. But of course, this is not just a basic dissolve. Now I've put these 2 transitions on, but I want to remove them, and there's actually a very easy way to remove them. We're simply going to use the remove effect command, and you can find remove effect actually located right up here at the top of your timeline, or what I do is I have it mapped on my keyboard as a shortcut, simply F5. There we go. I'm just going to remove both of those. Now if you're looking for a basic dissolve transition, you can actually find it all the way back at the top. Right up here in the blend category, you'll see there it is located right there. I could simply now take dissolve and drag it and drop it down onto my keyboard. Very nice. But I know you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Kev, is there an easier way to get to a dissolve transition? Well, of course there is. What you can actually do is navigate to any edit point and simply use the / key on the keyboard, which is the default shortcut for quick transition. Now you'll see that I was referring to it as a dissolve. Accessing it from over here in the effects palette lets me be specific and choose dissolve, but you'll see right above it and below it I have some other transitions. I have a dip to color, fade from color, fade to color, but using the quick transition command, you'll see that right up here at the top I can add any one of these different transition types that I want. Now in most cases, the 2 common ones you'll use in most cases are a dissolve and a dip to color. You'll see a lot of cases you'll have a flash to white on the screen. That's how you can achieve that effect right there. Now right now I have dissolve selected. You'll see the position is centered on the cut, meaning that because the duration is 24 frames, that there'll be 12 frames before the edit and 12 frames after the edit to make up the 24 frames that this dissolve is going to take up. You'll see the target drive that it's going to right now is the Mac drive. And over here on the left, you'll see that it's being applied to the video and any audio tracks that happen to be located below it. Now all I need to do is simply say add. Now depending on the type of system that I'm using, I could add and render if I wanted to, but what's important to keep in mind that if you take a look over here in the effects palette, you'll see these green dots. These green dots represent real-time effects, meaning I can simply say add, come back and press play, and guess what? This dissolve is going to happen in real time. Now depending on how powerful your system is, you could have multiple channels of real-time effects playing back without having to render any of them. Now one thing I do want to show you here, and I'm just going to remove both of these dissolves for a second, is that I have the ability, if I wanted to, let's say I had multiple edit points that I just wanted to add a transition between each one of them and I wanted it to be the same transition. If I mark an in point and an out point containing these two edits, and now I come back to one of them and hit again the backslash key, you'll see that I have a new option down here at the bottom that simply says apply to all transitions into out. If I select that, you'll see that I can also skip existing transition effects, meaning that if I happen to have a couple other edits in here that already had, let's say, wipes or, pushes in or pulls out or things like that, it's actually going to skip over those if I select it to. If I don't select it, it's of course going to plow right over top of them with a dissolve. Now all I need to do is simply say add, and you'll see that I now have a dissolve added on that first edit, and of course on the second edit. Very nice. So that's a little brief introduction to dissolves. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete this sequence. And what I want to do now is I want to talk about the other most common tool that you're going to use when working inside of Avid's Media Composer. And of course, I'm talking about the 3D Warp tool. Now, what we're going to do for the purposes of using the 3D Warp tool is I'm going to create what I would consider to be a basic effect inside of Media Composer. So let's just take this shot here. We're just going to mark an in and out point. Again, I'm going to hit B on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows. We're going to drop this into my sequences bin. And let's just take another shot. Let's take this one. Sure, why not? I'll take it to about there, and I'm going to create a new video layer in my timeline by simply pressing Command and Y on the Mac, Control and Y on Windows, and we're going to edit this onto V2. I'm simply going to select the entire clip. You'll see the duration is 13 seconds and 9 frames, and because I didn't mark an in point, we're going to be dropping this clip in starting at the out point and working our way back just like such. Now what I want to do is I actually want to have this at about, let's say at about half the size, moving across the screen. Very straightforward, very simple effect. Now most cases in other nonlinear editing applications, doing something like this might be considered a clip-based effect where you have very basic parameters such as scale, opacity, and even rotation at your disposal. Now one thing that's hugely advantageous about the 3D Warp tool, and I'm just going to go back into the effects palette by pressing Command and 8, you'll see 3D Warp is located right here inside of the blend category. I'm just going to take it, drag it, and drop it onto my clip. What I was going to say is that the 3D Warp tool is advantageous because it not only has scales and opacities and rotations, but many, many, many other parameters that you can adjust quickly and easily. Now, the only thing is that a lot of people get a little bit thrown because they don't know how to access the effect to get in and see those parameters. Well, what you need to do to access the parameters is to step into effects mode. Now, there's a few different ways that you can step into effects mode. The easiest way to step into effects mode is by simply clicking on the effects mode button located right here. Or you can find effects mode as well, located right down here, but for me, I have it mapped onto my keyboard. My shortcut to step into effects mode is Shift and Y. Once I press Shift and Y, you're going to see that I now have access to the effects editor, and inside the effects editor, you can see all of the different parameters that I have access to, from shape to corner pin to corner tracking, crop, scales, skews, rotations, positions. You'll see that we have much more at our disposal than in most standard clip-based effects. Now you're going to see that at the bottom that we have another effect in here. Because this clip is AMA linked to, we have access to frame flex that we talked about in a previous tutorial. But right now what we want to do is we want to create that basic effect of the image shrunk down and moving across the screen. We'll have it move from left to right. So how do we go about doing this? Well, it's actually very simple. The first thing that I like to do is I like to come up, and because I know that scaling is going to be the first thing that I adjust, is I like to activate scaling, just like that. What we're going to do is we're going to come all the way back to the beginning here, just like such. Let's make sure that we can see our effects editor. I'm just going to bring the effects editor over here to the left so it doesn't keep appearing and disappearing. And like I said, scaling is the first thing that we want to adjust. Now, a couple ways that we can obviously do that. I control down scaling and make adjustments right here with the slider bars, or I like the fact that I actually have a heads-up display up here. It's a little bit difficult to see, but if you look closely, you can actually get in and adjust the scaling like such. I could even switch over and adjust the crop if I wanted to, just like this. all right in the main window. I can even get in and adjust corner pin. We can even get in and adjust things like rotation, just like such, right here from within the window. Now, of course, if you don't like working like that, you do have complete control over getting in and adjusting the scaling and the crop and the rotation, like I said, right from the slider bars. Now, we don't want to adjust crop right now. We don't want to adjust rotation. We just wanted to adjust scaling. Now, I want to set this at about 50%. So all I'm going to do is simply select that slider bar. And because it's a fixed aspect ratio, I'm just going to punch in 50 to set that scale to be 50%. Now the thing is that I'm going to want to move this element off the screen. So how do I see what's going on over here? Because right now I can only see what's going on in the actual frame. Well, I do have the ability to zoom in and zoom out by simply using the reduce and the enlarge magnifying glasses right there. So now I can simply take this element and just position it right over here like that. Now what's important to keep in mind is that by adding that keyframe for scale, you'll see that if I navigate right down here to the lower right hand corner of the effects editor, I can show and hide the keyframe graphs, and because I only have scaling and position turned on, those are the only parameters that are having keyframes added to them. Nothing else has any keyframes associated with it, so keep that in mind. Now that I have my element right over here exactly where I want it, all I'm going to do is navigate right down to the end here. And I can do this one of two ways. I can add a keyframe right off the bat, or all I need to do is simply take the position and just drag it across the screen. And what I could do is I could come right back to the keyframe right here and simply say add keyframe. The only problem is you'll notice that as soon as I did that, it added a keyframe for every parameter, which I don't want to do. So I'm just going to undo what I just did. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come to position right here, and I'm simply going to right click and say add keyframe, because I know that the only parameter I'm going to be adjusting at this point is the position. Now all I need to do is simply grab the X slider, just drag that element over like such, and what I have now, if I step out of effects mode by simply hitting Y on my keyboard, which is my shortcut to step back into edit mode, or of course you could step back into edit mode right here, source and record mode, is if I come back to the beginning, you'll see now that I have this element moving across the bottom of the screen. All done very easily using the fantastic 3D warp tool. Now, of course, I do have the ability to get in and add drop shadows to this element. I can add rotation. There's so many different parameters that I have access to inside the 3D warp tool. I guarantee this is going to be your go-to effect when doing most of your editing work. Okay, now here's a common situation that we run into all the time. We have a motion graphics designer who's created an animation for us that we want to put in over top of our footage. And it's being given to us with an alpha channel. Let's just say it's an animation codec file that has the alpha channel embedded in it. How do we import that to work with it in our timeline? Well, it's actually very easy. What we're going to do is we're going to navigate to our graphics bin here. I'm just going to scroll that down. We'll actually create a new bin to put in our graphics folder here. We'll just call this graphics. I'm just going to put it into the graphics folder here. I'm going to simply right click on the bin and say import. Now I have some footage on my desktop in my elements folder, and this is again from Digital Juice's Video Tracks HD, and it's a loopable element. I'm going to select the loopable element, and what I need to do though before I import this is I need to tell Media Composer that this element has an alpha channel with it. If I come into my options for this element, you'll see I can get in and I can choose the type of alpha channel that's associated with this clip, whether I want to invert the alpha on import, meaning that white is opaque, I don't want to invert, meaning black is opaque, or I can ignore the alpha channel altogether, and I can even dilate the fill if I want to. Now in this case, I'm going to leave the alpha channel as invert on import, and I'm simply going to say OK. Now we're just going to make sure that we're importing the loop element, and I'm going to say open. You'll see in a couple of seconds here we have our element imported. I can now take it and simply double click on it, and there it is. Now what I'm going to do now is simply create a new video track by pressing Command and Y on the Mac, Control and Y for all my Windows friends out there. And let's take this clip. I'm just going to hit T on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows, and let's just edit this into video layer 3, and you'll see now that if I come back, this element is completely keyable over top of my footage. Now, of course, this is a loopable element, so I could simply drop it in again when the first element ends, and you'll see that it just keeps looping, and I could do this forever. Now, of course, this does beg the question, what happens if I import this element incorrectly? Meaning, let's just delete this clip. I'm just going to delete the media, not the master clip. I'm just going to say OK. And I'm going to re-batch import this file, so let's batch import. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to import it with the do not invert black equals opaque. Because in many cases you might import this have it the wrong way, and then you think to yourself, oh, well, I've got to delete, maybe I imported 15 different things. Oh, I've got to delete them all and go back, but you actually don't. You'll see in my timeline that the alpha is reversed. Well, no problem. Let's simply step into effects mode again, and you're going to see that inside of the matte key effect, I can simply invert the key just like that, and guess what? We now have this element back up and running, ready to go. Now I should also mention that inside of Media Composer 7, we do have the ability to AMA link to clips that have alpha channels, and the alpha information will be retained. Let me show you what I mean. I'm just going to remove the clips from this track. I'm going to delete this effect altogether, both the master clip and the media that's associated with it. And what I'm going to do again is I'm simply going to say AMA link. What we're going to do is navigate to the desktop, to Elements. Again, I'm just going to take my loop element. I'm simply going to come down and say open, and you'll see that in a couple of seconds, we now have this clip ready to go in my timeline. No importing necessary. It's just ready to link to and to be dropped into my timeline. We can come back now, hit play, and there we go. Very, very nice. Again, completely loopable, so we can loop that as many times as we want. Okay, so let me show you some basic color correction. Now, a great trick for everyone here is that if you have multiple bins open and you want to have them closed very quickly, with one of them selected, all you need to do is simply navigate up to Windows and come down and say Close All Bins. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back to the sequences bin. We're just going to delete this sequence, and I'm going to import a clip quickly here that we can work with. What I'll actually do is I'll AMA link to this clip. I actually have it right here on the desktop. It's called Untitled Sequence 06. I'm just simply going to say open. Let's stick it here onto my timeline, and this is a very common problem that editors run into. Footage comes back from the field, and it looks very blue because they didn't white balance the camera properly. This is a common problem that I see all the time, and we need to do a quick color fix to this so that we can use it in our production. Well, to do this is actually very easy. What we're going to do is we're going to navigate up to Windows, and we're going to come to Workspaces, and we're going to switch over to the Color Correction workspace. Now what's important to keep in mind is that everything that I'm going to show you is available to you in the standard version of Media Composer as well as Media Composer with Symphony option. Now you'll see right now I'm in the Hue Offset section. You might be in the Controls section, so your color correction window might look like this. But for what we're going to do, we're just simply going to use the Hue Offsets. Now, in most cases, what I like to do is I like to divide the shot up into three categories: whites, grays, and blacks. Now, if you don't have access to grays, in most cases you will have access to white and to black. This is why I always try to tell people that are going out to shoot in the field to take a clapboard with them. Why? Well, because it has black on it and it has white on them. It makes it very easy for you, the editor, to set a shot up with those two colors. But because we have gray here, we have a little bit of an added advantage. So let's start with black. Now, where I would probably eyedrop is right in here. This looks to be the blackest part of the shot right here. So what I'm going to do is with the shadows, I'm going to take the eyedropper and we're going to eyedrop right in there. Now you're going to see everything jumps as soon as I do that. Let's move on to the grays. Now I would consider this to be gray right here. So all I'm going to do is take the eyedropper for the midtones or the grays and eyedrop right there. Now last but certainly not least, we want to eyedrop the whites. So again, let's take our eyedropper. All I'm going to do is simply come up here to 416. I'm going to eyedrop that, and you'll see this is looking pretty close to what I think this should look like if it was white balanced properly in the field. Here's a look at the before, and here's a look at the after. You'll see with a few clicks of the mouse and the power of Avid's Media Composer, you can color correct this shot literally in a matter of seconds. Okay, so that wraps up lesson 4, and in our last lesson we're going to talk about delivering your final product. We're going to talk about exporting your sequence for audio post, exporting for the web, DVD and Blu-ray, and digital cutting to tape. So get post-production workflow tutorials and industry insight that you need to bring great stories to life. Simply head on over to avidblogs.com/post.